Close your eyes and think of an image of Jesus. Ready? I bet you saw a white man with light eyes, long straight hair, a red or brown beard, and skin that had never seen the desert sun. Now answer me. Why did you imagine this? Because they taught you. Because every church you entered had this image. Because every film, every painting, every biblical illustration showed Jesus like this. But what if I told you that this image has nothing to do with historical reality? That it was a political invention of the European Renaissance, and that this change in Jesus' face was not accidental, but the greatest visual manipulation in history to ensure power, control, and racial domination? Today I'm going to show you how Europe literally changed the face of God. And look, if you're not afraid of discovering truths that will make you question everything, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because this is just the beginning of many truths that will be revealed here. Now get ready, because what comes next will deconstruct one of the biggest lies ever told in the history of humanity. At the dawn of time, when the world was still shaped under the weight of the stars and the winds whispered ancient secrets, Jesus' face was not carved in cold marble or painted on linen canvas. He lived in the words, the songs, and the stories shared around the bonfires that warmed the desert nights. In those ancient times, faith was ignited by hope and sustained by the simplicity of symbols. The fish, gliding in the deep waters of belief, connected the faithful with the essence of the Nazarene. The anchor, firmly embedded in the earth, promised stability in times of change. The shepherd, carrying his sheep, was a mirror of the benevolent guide who led their souls. These were times when persecution drew shadows on the walls of the catacombs, and the whispers of prayer mingled with the silence of the tombs. There in the depths, far from the watchful eyes of the empire, the image of Jesus was a mosaic of hope, a reflection of the diversity of the people who followed him. He had the appearance of those who invoked him. Dark skin, hair that danced between frizzy and wavy, eyes that carried the wisdom of generations. As the centuries passed, and as Christianity infiltrated the stones of the Roman Empire, the need to materialize the divine in tangible forms grew like a legend, told and retold. But even so, Jesus' face remained that of a man from his homeland, echoing the arid landscapes and starry skies of Judea. He was a reflection of the ground his bare feet had walked on, and the voices that had cried out for his message. However, in the centuries that followed, Europe rose like an awakened giant, and the Renaissance brought with it a storm of colors and shapes, of shadows and light. The brushes of great masters such as Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael not only captured the beauty of the world, but also shaped perceptions of the divine. It was in this whirlwind of creativity and power that Jesus' face began to change, a change as profound as the currents of a river silently altering its course. The transformation was not a whim of chance, but a well-orchestrated dance of intention and power. Jesus, who once looked like the children of the land of his birth, was reimagined as a man with fair skin, golden hair, and eyes that reflected the northern sky. It became the mirror of Renaissance Europe, an embodiment of the idealized beauty its artists sought in their fever dreams. This new Jesus, now dressed in the colors of a distant continent, became a symbol not just of faith, but of cultural dominance. His new image, carved in cathedrals and painted in chapels, was a constant reminder of the emerging hegemony, a testament to art's ability to shape not only the divine vision, but also the perception of the world itself. Thus, in the heart of the Renaissance, under the starry sky that blessed the creations of the masters, the face of Jesus became a silent battlefield where ancient stories and new spiritual struggles confronted each other. And the echo of this transformation still resonates, like a drum beating in the savannah, like an omen blown by the winds that cross the mountains and valleys of time. The winds of change blew powerfully within Renaissance Europe, while the drums of destiny resounded with an unsettling rhythm, echoing across the hills and valleys of a changing continent. In that time of artistic alchemy, the master's brushes, like magic wands, cast spells on the canvas, transmuting the essence of the sacred into representations that met the designs of a new type of power. The church, sitting on the ivory throne of its cathedrals, and the families that drew the map of power like the Medici, sought not only to beautify the world, but to shape it to their will. In the furnace of the Renaissance, where the iron of culture was hammered by the fire of ambition, the need arose to forge a Christian identity that reflected not only the faith, but the ascendancy of Europe over the known world. Christianity, now an empire in itself, demanded that its followers see the features of the divine reflected in their own faces, as if the sky itself had decided to lean over the continent and project its image onto the white-skinned people. The artists, like shamans of a new creed, captured this vision and immortalized it with colors and shapes that spoke of a Jesus with fair skin, eyes like sapphires, and hair that resembled the gold of the sun rising over the European fields. And so, the Divine Mother, Mary, became the Lady of Florence, and the apostles who once walked under the arid sun of the ancient lands gained the features of the cold climes of the north. In the dance of paints, the heroes of faith shone with the light of Europe, while the villains' shadows were sculpted with the features of the other. And in a gesture of profound cosmic irony, the traitor, Judas, and the Pharisees, who embodied antagonism toward the message of love and redemption, were depicted with a darker palette, as if the painting itself conspired to tell a story of division and prejudice. Even the fallen angel, the devil, often gained features that evoked Africa, in an attempt to link evil to what was considered foreign and unknown. Thus, each brushstroke became a note in a melody carefully composed to celebrate dominance and justify power. Meanwhile, under the watchful eyes of the ancestors, in the churches of Ethiopia, Coptic Egypt and Armenia, the face of Jesus remained immaculate, as it had been conceived in the stories shared at the foot of the majestic baobab trees and under the eternal stars. Here, the image of the Nazarene continued to reflect the features of those who worshipped him, not as a political maneuver, but as a testimony to a faith that was deeply rooted in the hearts and traditions of his people. The contrast was as sharp as a blade's edge, and as Europe rose to dominate, these communities stood firm, like rocks against the tide, preserving the true essence of what had been. For they knew that the face of God was not tied to one color or shape, but shone in the diversity of his children. Thus, as the centuries passed and the world turned under the cloak of the constellations, the image of Jesus in Europe became an instrument of power, a justification for conquest and colonization. For if the divine was shaped in the likeness of the European, then the right to hegemony became a manifest destiny, a sacred order that justified the subjection of other peoples, as if the universe itself had granted its consent. And so, in the intertwining of eras, the Renaissance lie took shape and echoed its effects throughout the fabric of time. A dissonant note in the symphony of history, a reminder that power often disguises itself as truth, but also a promise that, like the eternal cycle of seasons, the truth will resurface, illuminating the shadows with its eternal light. And so, beneath the eternal heavens that witnessed the birth of stars and empires, the fate of men was sealed by a mundane and divine invention, the printing press. With its emergence, the winds of change blew more vigorously across the plains of history, bringing with it a new era of information and manipulation. What was once transmitted by word of mouth, from generation to generation, around the dancing flames of bonfires, could now be replicated in thousands of leaves, spreading like seeds in the wind, taking root in distant lands. It was at that moment, in the heart of the 15th century, that the Catholic Church, like a griot with hidden intentions, saw a golden opportunity in the potential of the press. The sacred words, until then kept in precious manuscripts, gained new life through illustrated Bibles, pamphlets, and engravings, circulated through the hands of the people. The image of Jesus, carefully sculpted by the Renaissance, now spread like a river in flood, overflowing its European banks and flooding the world with its new face. In the colonies of America, Africa, and Asia, this image was not just an artistic representation, but a herald of imperial power. The missionaries, messengers of a reimagined faith, carried in their luggage not only the word of God, but a vision of the divine that reflected the traits of the conqueror. And so, in villages under the African sun, in villages that were lost among the American rainforests, and in the temples that dotted the Asian horizons, children looked at the Son of God and did not recognize themselves. Let us then imagine the psychological impact, the depth of the cut in the souls of those who saw their own reflection, only in the faces of the enslaved, the dominated, that needed to be saved. Art, powerful as ancient magic, had become a weapon of domination, shaping the perception of the divine and, by extension, humanity. The decision to standardize the image of Jesus was like throwing a stone into the lake of history, whose waves are still felt, marking generations with their insistent reverberation. Even today, in our times of light and shadow, when knowledge circulates freely, like birds crossing the sky, the image of a Jesus with fair skin and sapphire eyes persists. It has become so deeply rooted in the collective psyche that questioning its veracity is considered almost sacrilege. Like an enchantment that resists time, this vision endures, and many are surprised to confront the historical, scientific, and archaeological truth that reveals a dark-skinned Nazarene, a son of the land of sand and sun. The visual forgery, perpetrated with the care of a blacksmith fashioning a sword, was so successful that its consequences still echo. But like rivers that always find their way to the sea, truth has an unbreakable power. She persists, patiently waiting for the moment to reveal herself, to tear the veil of illusion and illuminate minds and hearts with her genuine light. So, as the drums of time continue their unceasing beat, those who long for truth must lift up their voices, like the ancient songs that honored the gods in the days of old. For the truth, even when obscured, is never destroyed. It lives in the stories of those who refuse to forget, in the whispers of the ancestors who still guide us, and in the promise of a future where every face, every color, every feature is celebrated as the unique expression of the divine that lives within us all. And on this journey, humanity will find its true reflection, not in mirrors of power and domination, but in the clear and eternal waters of understanding and love. And so, the drums of destiny continued to beat, as the winds of time blew across the continents, carrying with them the echoes of insidious change. As European nations extended their claws over distant lands, the image of the white Christ, like a shadow cast by the rising sun, imposed itself on cultures with the force of thunder that breaks the silence of the night. In the vastness of Africa, where the land vibrated with the stories of ancient people, missionaries, like weavers of a new order, tore apart icons and symbols that had long nourished local souls. In its place, they erected statues and paintings of a Christ that did not reflect the core of those who contemplated him. In their hands, the fire that purged local beliefs was also the fire that shaped a new narrative of subservience. The divine, once a reflection of the earth itself, became an imposition from outside, a constant reminder that salvation came with a price, the price of identity. In the vast lands of Latin America, where the forests and mountains kept the secrets of the ancestors, the original people were forced to bow before a god that was alien to them. Sacred ceremonies, which celebrated the eternal cycle of nature, were suppressed, and in their place, churches rose that echoed with European hymns. The light-skinned Jesus became the silent watchman over these new lands, a symbol of the power that was imposed, the culture that dominated, and the bodies that were transformed into servants of a new order. In Asia, attempts to impose this image have been met with resistance, like a wave crashing against an immovable cliff. Millennial traditions, rooted in the wisdom of ancient sages, stood up as walls against cultural invasion. But even there, the impact was felt, and the seeds of European thought began to infiltrate the layers of society, promising a future where continental supremacy would become global. However, amid this storm of change, a quiet movement began to form beneath the surface. They were the scholars, the seekers of truth who ventured into the fields of the past, excavating the sands of time in search of answers. With the zeal of artisans, they reconstructed the face of Jesus from the evidence that the sacred soil of Galilee offered them. And what they discovered was a truth that echoed like silent thunder. Jesus' face was not that of a conqueror, but that of an ordinary man born of the earth with features that reverberated the diversity of humanity. This revelation, like a jewel hidden deep within the earth, was carefully recorded in books and articles, shared in academic halls, but rarely crossed the boundaries of specialized knowledge. The Church, in its quest to maintain the status quo, looked the other way. while society, afraid to confront its own beliefs, preferred the comfort of illusion to the blinding light of truth. And so, as the world advanced on the carpet of overtime, the image of the Renaissance Jesus remained a dominant icon, a representation that not only shaped the vision of the divine, but also reflected the hierarchy of power among men. But as the eternal cycle of the seasons promises the return of rain after drought, the truth contained within it, the promise of rebirth. For those who sought the truth knew that, however much history was distorted, the essence of the divine, the true face of Jesus, would live eternally in the diversity of his children, awaiting the moment to resurface and illuminate the world with its unshakable authenticity and beauty. And so the seed of truth, planted in the hearts of many, would germinate, promising a future where everyone could see the divine reflected in their own faces, celebrating the unity in diversity that has always been the true intention of the cosmos. And so, in the vast theater of the cosmos, where the stars eternally dance to the rhythm of ancient songs, the silent conflict between truth and illusion played out like a cosmic drama of unimaginable proportions. The revelation, like distant thunder approaching, echoed in the minds of those who dared to question the invisible chains that bound them. The drum of truth, previously muffled, began to resonate with increasing strength, calling awakened hearts to a new understanding. In the vastness of the savannas, where the winds whisper stories of ancient times, the ancestors watched with watchful eyes. They knew that truth, like a sacred seed, needed to be cultivated with care and courage. For the lie, rooted in structures of power, had its claws sunk deep into the fabric of reality, supported by those who feared the light it would bring. The church, with its stone walls and unquestionable authority, was like a fortress built on the foundations of a distorted history. Theologians, guardians of sacred knowledge, walked through candle-lit corridors, aware of the weight of unspoken truths. Historians, like scribes of a forgotten time, carried the burden of conscience, knowing that the official narrative was a tapestry woven with threads of deception. But why, then, did they remain silent? Why did they refuse to confront the truth beating in their own hearts? The answer, simple and complex as the ancient legends, lay in fear. Fear that accepting the true face of Jesus would dismantle the power structure carefully built over the centuries. Fear that revealing their skin color would be a fatal blow to the racial supremacy that underpinned the dominance of Western civilization. For to recognize that Jesus the Nazarene was a man with brown skin, born from a land that did not reflect the faces of the conquerors, was to accept that the very basis of white supremacy was nothing more than an illusory construction. It was admitting that the idea of racial superiority, so often used to justify oppression and subjugation, found no support in the sacred scriptures, but on the contrary, clashed with the very spirit of the gospel. And so, maintaining the lie became a dance of survival, where each step was calculated to preserve the illusion. Resistance to change was fierce, with attacks disguised as indifference, appealing to a false universalism that tried to minimize the importance of what was visible and tangible. "It doesn't matter what color Jesus is," said the guardians of tradition, while their actions and omissions screamed the opposite, perpetuating a vicious cycle of domination and exclusion. But those who heard the call of the drums of destiny knew that the moment of truth was coming. They knew that Jesus' true message of love and equality could no longer be suffocated by the shadows of lies. And so, the whispers became voices, and the voices a cry, demanding that the face of the divine be revealed in all its diversity and beauty. The path ahead was full of challenges, requiring courage that only the bravest possessed. It demanded that churches remove false images from their walls, that art be revisited, that stories be retold faithfully. It demanded that the truth be accepted, not as a threat but as a liberation. For in accepting the true face of Jesus, the world would find not only reconciliation, but also a new hope, where every face, every color, every culture would be recognized as a unique and precious expression of the divine. And in that recognition, humanity would find its way back to the unity that has always been its true heritage. On the vast horizon of the 21st century, where the ancient stars watch the ceaseless dance of humanity, a new dawn breaks. The drums of truth, once muffled by the veils of lies, now resonate with renewed vigor. There is an awakening, a movement that echoes the ancient songs of the griots, those guardians of stories who always knew that the truth could not be silenced forever. Beneath the skies that have witnessed the birth of civilizations and the fall of empires, a new narrative begins to emerge. Artists, like modern shamans, lift their voices and brushes, conjuring up images that capture the true face of the Nazarene. They delve into the deep waters of ancestry, bringing to light representations of Jesus with features that reflect Africa, the cradle of humanity, and the Middle East, where his bare feet once trod. Each stroke, each color, is a note in the symphony of restoration, a dance of light and shadow that seeks to rebalance the scales of history. In progressive churches, a courageous movement is unfolding. Renaissance images, which for centuries were accepted without question, are now gently withdrawn, replaced by representations that honor historical reality. It is an act of courage, a challenge to the status quo that has for so long shaped our perception of the divine. And with each removal, the echo of the drums resonates louder, heralding the arrival of a new era of understanding and truth. In the world of cinema, independent filmmakers have become the new storytellers, casting Middle Eastern actors to portray the historical Jesus. His cameras, like eyes that see beyond appearances, capture the essence of a man who lived, loved, and fought in a land of deserts and hopes. And with each scene, the truth comes to life, challenging the narratives that have been accepted without question for so long. But like any change that challenges the foundations of power, there is resistance. The revolt manifests itself like a storm, with voices claiming that change is an affront, a gesture of political correctness that threatens tradition. But these voices, echoing like stubborn winds that refuse to yield, cannot shake the growing force of truth. For in reality, the real affront was committed centuries ago, when the Renaissance, with its brilliance and ambition, altered the face of the divine to serve its own purposes. And now, in confronting this truth, many are called to a deep examination of conscience, because accepting the true face of Jesus is also accepting the challenge of confronting the inherent racism that permeates the faith of many. It is a call to transformation, a journey that goes beyond the surface and invites each person to look inside, at the shadows that inhabit the heart. For those who dare to walk this path, the reward is renewed faith, a deeper connection to the original message of love, justice, and liberation that Jesus preached. For when illusions are shattered and the true face of the Nazarene is revealed, faith becomes a more authentic reflection of humanity in all its diversity and beauty. Thus, the choice presents itself as a rite of passage: continue in the safety of a counterfeit image, or embark on the journey to discover the real Jesus, the one who walked in the dust of Judea and faced power with a revolutionary love that transcends barriers of color and culture. And by making that choice, each individual is one step closer to the truth that liberates, a truth that illuminates the shadows and reveals the infinite beauty of the divine within us all. For in the end, truth is an eternal flame that cannot be extinguished, and it calls us all to its warmth and light,